So to the best of my knowledge, this is the first video on how to install a screen door on a 30-foot yurt from Pacific Yurts. My name is Dan Holguin. I live in the mountains of Montana, right at the entrance of Glacier National Park. And today I'm going to show you the entire process of getting this thing into place from start to finish. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to get on this project. Yeah, there's a couple big reasons why getting a screen door makes sense. And the first one is, you want to make sure that you're getting proper airflow and that the yurt is cool on the inside. But you also want to have some type of barrier against some of the bugs that you'll experience in the summer months. And although where we live in Montana, the bugs aren't terrible, there is an element of comfort that myself and even our guests that come and stay with us are looking forward to. And I think that by having a screen door in place, we can achieve that goal. But the other one too, and really this is probably a bigger one for me, is I put this yurt where I did because of its proximity to nature and to the wilderness and the animals and everything around it. And I think there's an element that you're missing out on when you have a closed door to nature. I mean, I could throw a rock from right here and be right into the wilderness of Montana. That's how close we are, and I designed it this way on purpose. And so I think that by having a screen door, you can have the doors open, you can get that nice breeze coming in without having to worry about the bugs, but that you also just get one bit closer to nature, You get a little bit closer to the birds, you get a little bit closer to the smells of the pine trees and the jasper. You get a little bit closer to what the experience of a yurt is supposed to be, in my opinion. And so I think that this is going to be a really cool addition to that full experience. All right, so looks like we get a few different things here that it comes packed with. A little bit of swag here, Pacific Yurts keychain. That's cool, they sent a shirt over. Pacific Yurts, I like that. Definitely gonna wear that one. Some of the other stuff that we've got, I'm guessing this is my deadbolt for the inside. On the top, this just keeps the stationary door in place, so I'm gonna replace that a little bit later. I've also got a couple door handles for the screen door, a lock set, indoor handle that I'm replacing, as well as some of these hinges also. So the cool thing about getting a yurt and the hardware for everything is that everything that I've got from Pacific Yurts has come really neatly packaged, which has been really nice. And they do everything by hand. They build it by hand, they pack it by hand, they create the shipping containers by hand, and then they send it out. And every time that I've ordered something from them, especially the accessories, they've always been packed perfectly, and I've never had any issues with missing pieces or anything like that. Like, they really just do a good job of making sure that they double and probably even triple check everything that they're sending you. Now, something that is important to note is that you can get screen doors for your yurt before you buy and after you buy. So, like, if it's something that's on your mind right now, whether or not you should get the screen door option, it's much easier to just have this done before your yurt arrives at the house. I didn't do that only because I guess I just wasn't thinking about it at the time. However, there's a lot less work to do if you do it beforehand, but you can still retrofit it after the fact as well. Now, a couple things I'm noticing right off the bat is that there is some bit of framing that goes around the screen door on one side, but if you look around the back here, we don't have that. So my thought is that the framing of the screen is going to face outside to give it a little bit more texture. And you'll also notice that the framing reveal is different in terms of height at the top versus the bottom. My intuition says that the reveal, the thinner reveal, goes up, and the thicker reveal down here goes at the bottom. So this is how I'm going to set my screen door into the frame. And before I do any pre-drilling or anything for my hinges, I'm just going to dry fit it into place and just see if it fits. Now it should, because I already gave my measurements to Pacific Yurts and they were really nice and helped me to plane those dimensions down so that they would fit. So this shouldn't have any issue getting right into place here, which it doesn't, and that's fantastic. And see, that just goes back to what I was saying earlier, just about the precision and the double and triple checking that Pacific Yurts does before all of this stuff gets shipped out to you. So you can see that there's a little bit of wiggle room here, which is actually not a problem at all, because once I get this level, top, bottom, left to right, that's gonna sit right in this opening perfectly, and we're gonna have any issues with bugs or anything else, and this screen door is gonna look really nice. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this out for now. We'll set it aside. The next thing I'm gonna do is square it up, top, bottom, and left to right. Now, you could use whatever you have for shims. I just happen to have a bunch of paint sticks left over from another project, so I'm gonna use these. I've got a thick one here and one that's about, just a little bit thinner than that. So I'm gonna use these. Now, if I just look at like my overall setup right now, what I can tell is that there's a big reveal from the top and the bottom here. So because I want that to be equal, I'm gonna throw the big stick underneath in the center. I'm gonna lift this up. All right, so now that that's in there, that reveal top to bottom actually looks perfect. That's awesome. Now the next thing that I'm seeing is my screen door is tilting to the right a little bit. So it's tight in this corner and loose in this one. So I'm gonna use a thin stick. I'm gonna stick that right up in the top here. Perfect. Now, what I'm looking for is an even gap between the door frame and the screen door frame. Now, does it have to be an exact science? I mean, you could obsess over it as much as you want, but the big thing that you just have to remember is that wood will continue to expand and contract over time. And so you don't want to put it up too tight, because that could potentially damage your hinges or your screen door itself. But if you've got, like an 1/8 of an inch reveal on the sides, I think you're gonna be just fine. And what I have right now is a nice 1/8 all the way down. It does get a little bit tighter down here, so I'm gonna shift this over just a little bit, okay? So now I got an 1/8 of an inch there, that's great. How are we looking on this side? 1/8 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch. Okay, and then it gets tight here at the bottom, so this is interesting. What I'm gonna have to do is shift over my bottom left now, just to the point where I've got a bit of a gap. And if you're within, a 1/16 of an inch, I think that you're gonna be just fine. Also remembering too that this screen door frame sits up against the existing door frame. So even if there is a gap in here, remember that you're not gonna get any bugs inside of the yurt because of how that screen door frame sits against the existing. So I've got a nice fat 1/16 up to an 1/8 there. Got a nice fat 1/16 up to an 1/8 there. Top and bottom look good. And yeah, so does my top. All right, great. So the next thing that I'm gonna do is, might be a little bit overkill, but it's gonna allow your screen door to just sit in place without worry of it moving around. And so I'm just gonna sling up some painter's tape here just to hold this in place. My measurements for the hinges were 9 inches from the bottom up and 5 inches from the top down, and then just centering the third hinge right in the middle of the doorway. Something I was just thinking about, when it comes to deciding which side of the door gets the hinges, here's what I recommend. If you have the French door set up like I do, you should probably put the hinges on the same side of the stationary door as you do on the screen door. That way, as you open it, it opens away from the door that you open and close. But if you have the single door set up on your yurt, then it probably just makes sense to put the screen door hinges on the same side as your main door hinges are. So let's get these hinges put on. First things first, because I have a Trex deck and there's gap in between each one of these boards, if I drop a screw, I'm screwed. And so I'm gonna put my Pacific Yurt shirt down right underneath my work area so that if I do drop something, I don't lose it forever. Then from there, there's a couple things to think about before installing the adjustable spring hinges that come with the door. First off is these adjust by these holes here in the top, and so I want to make sure that as I put my hinges in place that this adjustment piece is facing upwards. And then also too, I want to make sure that the barrel of this hinge is directly in line with my gap. Okay, so from there I'm going to adjust it by putting the bottom piece, or the bottom part of the hinge, right at the bottom of my line, and making sure that my hinge is dead center of my gap, which looks really good right there. I'm just going to go ahead and make a couple marks in here and we'll get this thing lined out. Now in each pack of springs, you're going to get a couple different things with it. First is a couple of these really small tension pins, and then secondly is a tension rod. Now the rod is going to fit right into the top part of the spring in the holes, and then you'll just rotate that rod over to the left, and then take one of those tiny little tension pins and fit it into place in the holes next to it. This is mostly a feel thing, so you don't want to over rotate the spring too much before putting in a pin. You'll know when you've kind of reached the end point of what that spring will allow. And once you're done with that, you're just going to repeat that process 2 more times for the remaining springs. Next is to install the hook and eye locking mechanism by measuring down 20.5 inches and over 2 inches for the eye, and then the hook gets attached to the existing door frame perpendicular to the screen door. So hinges are on, everything is good there, but as I come up to the top here, I got a little fine tuning to do. So you can see how the roof fabric hits the top of the screen door here. So I'm just going to trace this out, cut the fabric back, and then we should be good to go. Next up is to install the sweep that attaches to the bottom of the door frame to keep the bugs out at the bottom. So start with an overall width of your door frame. From there, you're going to just put a small piece of painter's tape on one end of the sweep. I do this that way when I go to measure, I can see my line really easily before cutting it. Make sure that you got your safety glasses on, and I was using this angle grinder to help cut that piece really easily. I also did this job by myself pretty much, and so I had to use these clamps to help hold the sweep in place, and then I just screwed off the ends and the middle before taking my clamps off and then screwing the other 6 screws in there. All right, all done. So excited to have this thing finished. Oh yeah, that's the sound of a good install right there. You know, usually when a door is off center, you'll either hear it pitter patter from the top or the bottom because it's hitting at different times inside of the door frame. But that is exactly where it should be. And if I look from bottom all the way up, there's no daylight in between the screen door and the door frame itself, which means that it's sitting in there just where it should, nice and level. You know, the screen door upgrades, and it seems like the simplest upgrades really make the yurt experience just a lot more comfortable and a lot more enjoyable. So that's it. That is the installation process for a screen door on a 30-foot Pacific Yurt's yurt. All right. So for a couple hours of labor and just a few simple tools, you can add a really cool addition to a yurt to make your experience more enjoyable and just a little bit cooler. All right, so thank you for watching. Thank you to Pacific Yurts for sending this over. And if you have any questions on the installation process at all, let me know in the comments.